This morning, the committee continues to examine the nuclear agreement that the Obama administration has arranged with Iran, and we've got a 60-day congressional review period. Yesterday, members of the House attended a closed briefing with Secretary Kerry on this very consequential agreement, and we'll begin to hear the case publicly today as Secretary Kerry testifies before the Senate. Myself and Mr. Engel led the briefing yesterday in closed session with the House with Secretary Kerry, but he will appear before this committee next week. What's clear from yesterday's briefing and clear from reading the testimony of our witnesses today is that the administration has its work cut out making one particular case to this body, and that is this in our long-term national security interests? All of us want a verifiable and a lasting agreement, and that's what we're looking at. But are the temporary constraints on Iran's nuclear program, the 10-plus years constraints, worth the price of permanent sanctions relief? And if Iran does cheat, they have, by the way, cheated on every agreement that I know of that they've made in the past. If they do, could sanctions developed over years be put quickly back in place? As we'll hear from one sanctions expert today, this deal eviscerates the sanctions web that was putting intense pressure on the regime. Intense pressure on the regime up until the interim agreement when we lifted those sanctions and they began to get $700 million a year. Virtually all economic, financial, and energy sanctions under this agreement now disappear. This includes not only sanctions on Iran's nuclear program, but key sanctions on the bad banks that have supported Iran's terrorism and ballistic missile development. In return, Iran is not required to dismantle key bomb-making technology. It is permitted a vast enrichment capacity, and it is allowed to continue its research and its development to gain an industrialized nuclear program once parts of this agreement begin to expire in as little as 10 years. And just to quote the President on this, he said of his own agreement, in year 13, 14, 15, Iran's breakout times would have shrunk almost down to zero. And with tens of billions in near instant sanctions relief, it defies logic to think that somehow this money will not bolster Iran's worldwide campaign of terror. With this agreement, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, responsible, by the way, for the death of hundreds of American troops, this individual gets removed from a key sanctions list. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, under this agreement, is a winner. Hamas will be able to rebuild its tunnels faster, and Hezbollah will get more powerful weapons, and you've all seen in the last month reporting on Iran's commitment to both of those institutions to resupply rockets, missiles, special precision guidance for Hezbollah missiles, its commitment to rebuild the tunnels under Israel. So it's no wonder that Israelis left, right, and center oppose this agreement. Even more troubling to us here in the United States is that Iran, with the backing of Russia, won an 11th hour concession to remove international restrictions on its missile program in 8 years and conventional arms in 5. And of course, Russia doesn't care. They'll be making hundreds of millions of dollars in arms sales. And the missiles are not going to be aimed at Moscow. What the Russians have is the capacity to sell to the Iranians, and this is what they want to do, targeting information, frankly. And as the Secretary of Defense just testified, the I in ICBM stands for intercontinental, which means flying from Iran to the United States. He said that is why we do not want that kind of capacity to be transferred. Countries build ICBMs for one reason, and that's to deliver nuclear weapons. At the same time that the restrictions on Iran's missile program come off, so do sanctions on the Iranian scientists involved in their bomb work. This, of course, is a deadly combination. Iran's Oppenheimer gets a reprieve. A German citizen involved in the AQ Khan network has his sanctions lifted. It's difficult to see how amnesty to nuclear proliferators helps us. In our hearing last week, many members expressed concerns about the adequacy of the inspections allowed under this agreement. The administration settled for a 24-day process, but this week, a former top international inspector expressed great skepticism that this would give inspectors what they need. And as a former CIA director testified to us last week, our national technical means won't be sufficient for verifying this agreement. Without an invasive inspection regime, I would not tell you we'll know enough to give you sufficient warning. So that really puts the weight of effort on the IAEA's ability to go anywhere at any time, unquote. I now turn to the ranking member for any opening statement he may have.